I knew something was terribly wrong the moment I stepped outside and saw sunlight hitting my yard in places that had been shaded for 20 years. At first I thought maybe a storm had taken down a limb or two, but then I heard the buzzing chainsaws, 3 of them, and when I rounded the corner, I froze. HOA Karen stood in my yard, arms crossed like a proud general, watching hired workers cut down my oak trees my father planted when I was 12. The logs were already stacked, the stumps raw and exposed, and she had the nerve to smile at me. She didn't know those trees raised the value of my land, not hers. She didn't know the county appraiser was already scheduled, and she definitely didn't know she'd just committed a felony, which she was about to find out. Asterisk, when I bought that property 12 years ago, it wasn't the house that sold, it was the trees. For massive oak trees planted along the southern corner of the lot, old enough to feel like they'd been there forever. Thick trunks, branches that formed a natural arch of shade, and leaves that glowed gold every autumn. They were memory trees. My father planted the same kind on our childhood property, and the way those oaks rustled in the wind felt like home. It was peaceful back then, before the HOA expanded its borders, before Karen got the board presidency, before she decided that my yard was her personal landscaping project. The trouble started small, as it always does with people like her. A warning about my trash can placement, a friendly reminder that my porch light wasn't regulation color, a complaint about my truck being too large for neighborhood aesthetics. But the real battle began the day she introduced the new HOA Beauty initiative, her pet project that gave her the excuse to enforce anything she wanted under visual harmony. I ignored most of her nonsense. My home was grandfathered in, and I was in no violation of any rule, and that drove her mad, absolutely mad. She tried measuring my lawn height. She tried lecturing me about inconsistent paint tones on my shutters, but none of it stuck. And that's when she fixated on my trees. She once asked, "Have you ever thought about removing those for oaks? They block the view of the street." I answered, "That's the point." She didn't like that the next time she brought it up, she couched it under safety. "The root system looks invasive," she said. "They've been here longer than any house on this street." Still, she pushed. She brought landscapers to my yard and acted like she was conducting an inspection. She even sent letters claiming the trees violated visual uniformity. I still shrugged her off, but Karen was never the type to accept being ignored. She escalated. One chilly October morning, I left for a work trip. I'd be gone 3 days. I didn't think much of it. My cameras were on, my lights were set on timers. My trees swayed peacefully in the wind as I drove off. When I returned that Friday afternoon, the first thing I noticed was silence. No birds, no rustling leaves, just stillness. Then I stepped into the backyard and I stopped breathing. All 4 trees, gone, not trimmed, not pruned, gone, cut down to stumps, each one raw and pale like open wounds in the earth. Piles of branches lay scattered, the leaves already drying. My yard looked naked, violated, wrong. I stood there in shock, unable to comprehend the sight. Then I heard voices, laughter, and that damn unmistakable tone. "I told you it would open the view. Doesn't that look so much cleaner?" I walked around the side of my house. There she stood, HOA Karen, with 3 workers in neon vests. Chainsaws rested against their legs, and she smiled at me like she'd done me a favor. "I took care of the problem," she said, brushing non-existent dust off her pastel cardigan. I stared at her, unable to form words. Finally, I managed. "You cut down my trees. They were non-compliant," she said breezily. "Dangerous, too close to the sidewalk, blocking the visibility triangle." She made a tiny triangle shape in the air with her fingers. "There is no sidewalk," I snapped. "Well," she said, shrugging, "there could be one someday." I felt something in me crack, the kind of crack that doesn't mend. You had no right. They were community hazards. They were on my property. They were visible from community property, she said, lifting her chin with that smugness she weaponized like a knife, which makes them subject to HOA review. I took a step towards her. The workers shifted uneasily. "Karen," I said quietly, "I'm going to give you a single chance to explain who authorized this." "I did," she said proudly. "And let me tell you, that appraiser is going to be thrilled. Your property values are going to match the neighborhood now." I froze. "What appraiser?" "Oh," her eyes lit up. "The one coming for your refinance inspection." My stomach dropped. I had scheduled an appraiser, a legitimate one. The purpose was to calculate the increased value from the renovations I'd done. New roof, remodeled kitchen, upgraded siding. The trees weren't just sentimental, they were a major value factor. Mature oak trees added tens of thousands to a property. Karen had known. She had known. She'd seen the letter in my mailbox earlier that week. I caught it on camera, her walking past my house, pausing at my mailbox, squinting at the envelope. She didn't take it, but she saw enough, and she cut down the trees before the inspection. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this?" She tilted her head, faux sympathetic. "Because you were going to hurt the neighborhood's aesthetic. Those old trees brought down the uniformity. I fixed it." I took a breath. "Slow, controlled, dangerous. You were going to pay for this," she scoffed. "Pay? I improved your property. No, you trespassed. destroyed personal assets, commissioned illegal work, and exceeded your authority. She raised her chin. Oh, please. HOA rights allow access. No, they don't, I snapped. Not for tree removal, and never without written notice. Well, she said smugly, we'll let the HOA board figure that out. We did, and they did not side with her. I called an emergency meeting, and the board gathered on my front lawn within the hour. The workers Karen hired hadn't even left yet. I pulled up the footage from my security cameras. Karen entering my backyard gate. Karen pointing at trees. Karen handing cash to the workers. Cash. Under the table. Work. Without permits on someone else's property. The HOA board members stared at the screen horrified. Karen, you didn't seriously. I was exercising my authority, she shouted. Our regulations clearly state your regulations don't apply to his property. One board member snapped. His grandfathered in his property predates the H. Another added. Her face went white, but it got worse because the next morning came the appraiser, a tall guy in his 50s, clipboard in hand, walking toward me with a puzzled expression. Sir, weren't there supposed to be 4 mature oak trees in the southeast yard? Yes, I said. There were. I'm noting a significant discrepancy. That alters your valuation by. He looked down and winced. A large amount. Karen was watching from across the street, pretending to get her mail but very obviously eavesdropping. What happened to the trees? The appraiser asked. The HOA president cut them down while I was out of town, I said calmly. He raised his eyebrows so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. That's a felony. I knew that. He knew that. And Karen finally realized the gravity of what she'd done. The appraiser took photos of the stumps, documented the destruction, and told me exactly what I needed. Homeowners insurance will cover part of replacement costs, but with the footage and witnesses, you can easily pursue full restitution and treble damages for intentional property destruction. Treble 3 times the value. The 4 oaks were appraised together at $38,500 multiplied, $115,500. I saw the blood drain from Karen's face when she overheard the number. That afternoon, I served her with notice of intent to sue. She stormed across my lawn screaming, "You can't sue me. I was acting for the HOA." "No," I said, handing her the paperwork. "You were acting alone. The board already confirmed it." She shook the papers at me. "You don't understand. This will bankrupt me." "That sounds like a you problem," I said. The board voted to remove her from office immediately. They also released a written apology to the neighborhood and to me. But that wasn't the end. A week later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on her door with a summons. Civil court, property destruction, trespassing, unauthorized contracting, forgery of authority. Karen cried on her lawn. Literally, cried. The same woman who strutted around controlling everyone else's property stood there sobbing like a child because reality finally caught up to her. The lawsuit dragged on for months. She tried every excuse in the book. I thought the trees were dangerous. They were old. They blocked the view. I was protecting the neighborhood. The judge wasn't buying any of it. He played the footage in the courtroom. The clip of her smiling while the chainsaws buzzed. The cash exchange. The lack of permits. The clear trespassing. His ruling was swift. She owed the full $115,500 plus court fees, plus the cost of replanting, plus punitive damages for abuse of authority, all told, $142,000. She nearly collapsed. The HOA announced she was banned from holding office permanently. Her husband put their home up for sale within 2 months. Rumor was they needed the money to pay me. I used the settlement to plant 6 new oak trees, not for -6. And every time the wind blows through them, rustling the leaves like gentle applause, I smile. Karen wanted to punish me instead. She paid to improve my property, and I'll never forget the look on her face. The day the appraiser told her the number, she wanted to take something from me, but in the end, she gave me everything.